There we go. Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of NCompass Live. I am your host, Krista Porter, here at the Nebraska Library Commission. NCompass Live is the Commission's weekly webinar series where we cover a variety of topics that may be of interest to libraries. We broadcast the show live every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Central Time, but if you're unable to join us on Wednesdays, that's fine. We do record the show as we are doing today, and it will be available for you to watch later at your convenience. Both the live show and the recordings are free and open to anyone to watch. So please do share, spread the word to your friends, family, neighbors, colleagues, anyone you think might be interested in any of the topics we have on NCompass Live. For those of you not from Nebraska joining us today, the Nebraska Library Commission is the state agency for libraries, so similar to your whatever state library. So we provide training and resources and databases and grants to all types of libraries in the state. So you will find shows on NCompass Live for all types of libraries. Public, academic, K-12, corrections, museums, historical societies, archives. Really, our only criteria is that it's something to do with libraries. We have Nebraska Library Commission staff sometimes come on the show to do presentations for us about things that we're doing here through the Library Commission, but we also bring in guest speakers, which is what we have this morning. Today we have joining us is Professor Andrew J. Smith from Emporia State University, who is going to talk about everyday advocacy for smaller libraries. Good morning, Andrew. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning, Krista. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. We're really happy to have you here with us today. And we have, Emporia is in Kansas and here in Nebraska. We have lots of smaller libraries. So we know what we're dealing with, the small rural places. So I will just hand it over to you, Andrew, to take it away and tell us about how we can do this with our libraries.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. The very first thing I have to do is apologize to people. I have suffered from a weak blood vessel in my nose from an early age. And guess what? It decided that 5 minutes ago was a perfect time to start gushing forth with blood. So I'm sitting here with one finger pressed against my nose to stem the flow. And I thought that probably wasn't a very good image to preserve for posterity. So you don't get to see me. I hope maybe you'll get to see me later on, but right at the moment,
sure.
It's just my disembodied voice. So apologies for that. But anyway, thank you so much for coming today to listen to me talk about everyday advocacy for smaller libraries, practical and affordable solutions. And this is actually a redo of a session I did at ARSL last August. And I'm happy to do it again because everybody needs to hear this and understand what's going on. So the presentation today, which of course is not doing what it's supposed to do. I'm sorry. There we go.
There it goes. It worked like 2 days ago.
Finally, it worked perfectly on Monday when we did the rehearsal, of course. So I'm going to talk briefly about why does this matter? Why should we be concerned about everyday advocacy? Why do you need to listen to me talking about this? We're going to talk about what library advocacy really is. I'm going to define what I call everyday advocacy as opposed to crisis advocacy. Then I'm going to talk about best practices for everyday advocacy, and I'm going to suggest some next steps to you. So that's where we're going, and we'll see as we go along what happens. Oh, it works. Go. So why does this matter? Well, it should be no surprise to you that I think that libraries matter. You're here because you think that libraries matter too. Libraries are vital to their communities, whatever that community may be, whether it may be a city, whether it may be an academic community, whether it may be a school. It doesn't matter. Libraries matter. And the point is that libraries provide educational resources for all. We are the only people responsible for providing education resources from birth through kindergarten, beyond 12th grade, and beyond college through end of life. So if you think about it, you as a librarian have responsibility for helping people for a much longer time than a school, a K-12 school, or a college, because you're everything else. So that's why libraries matter. And libraries support their communities. They support particularly public libraries through business development and helping people reach their full potential through the provision of accurate and unbiased information. Now, those are important terms, and I'll say them again: accurate and unbiased information. So as soon as somebody says everything's available on Google, we don't need you silly librarians, the point is you are there to provide accurate and unbiased information, and that is vital. Now, here's my big point. We all assume that everybody knows what a library is. We assume that everybody knows what a librarian does, and we assume that everybody knows the value a library brings to its community. I want to suggest to you that those assumptions are all false, because everybody knows a library is a building with books. A librarian is someone who stamps books and reads all day, and that a library is a nice thing to have. You can walk into any room and 90 to 95% of the people, if you ask them these questions, these are the answers you will get, which means that almost everybody doesn't know what a library is. Few people really understand what a librarian is trained to do, and they've no clue why a library is a nice thing to have. So this is where we need to be thinking. We need to get in our brains that very few people know what a library really is, what a librarian does as a matter of course, and the true value a library brings to its community. Now, why do you need me to be telling you this? So, as Krista said, I'm Andrew Smith. I'm an associate professor in the School of Library and Information Management at ESU. We are your local library school down in Emporia, Kansas. We're completely online, asynchronous. And we're in rural Kansas. We're in the middle of a large farming and ranching area, so we understand rural libraries. Currently, I spend my life teaching library advocacy. I teach courses in research and collection development and management. I'm very concerned with helping students understand international aspects of librarianship. I also teach indexing, I teach genealogy for librarians, and I'm about to teach a course in music librarianship. So I'm all over the place, but having fun doing it. As far as small and rural libraries, I am a former board member and a former board chair of the Emporia Public Library. I also serve as a visiting professor for the University of Belgrade in Serbia and the European Centre for Peace and Development, which is a division of the United Nations University for Peace. So a few people think that I know something. I actually think I know a little bit less than they do, but I have some sort of credibility in the library stakes and in the public library stakes, and from the side of being a board member, being a board chair, and working very closely with the executive director of a small public library. So that's who I am and why I'm here, because I think this is important. So what is library advocacy? We're hearing all, oh, advocate, advocate. You're getting emails every day from people saying you must advocate. But what is library advocacy? I would suggest that any good library advocacy program educates people on what a library really is. Now, this is where I'm sorry I don't have my camera on, because I have a little visual reminder for you. I would suggest a library is bringing people and information together. And if you could see me, I would have my two hands coming together and clasping each other. But I think that's what a library really is. I also think it's important to emphasize that it doesn't matter the form in which we do this, but this is the underpinning of every library service, bringing people and information together. It is what we have always done. It is what we are planning to continue to do. And so in the current arena, shall we say, I think it's really important to emphasize the continuity of what libraries have been doing, what libraries are currently doing, and what libraries are planning to continue to do. Libraries bring people and information together. It's also important that we teach people the value of a library to its community. So what does a library actually do? What are we doing? What are your programs designed to do as far as your community is concerned? And by community, I mean both the individuals in your community and the sum total of your community as a result of what those individuals are doing. We also need to advocate or educate, I beg your pardon, on the need for unbiased, independent information sources. And if I think that 90 to 95% of people don't understand libraries, even fewer people understand online information, especially the large commercial companies and what they're doing. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the large commercial companies. They provide an excellent service, but they are not libraries, and they're not unbiased, and they're not independent, because that's not what they're set up to be. So we need to educate people on when somebody says everything is available online, first of all, why that is not true and what actually is online and how it is presented. And then lastly, we need to educate people on the benefits of trained information professionals. That would be you. So you are not simply sitting in the library all day reading books. You are not simply somebody who stamps books, putting that lovely date stamp in. That is not what you do. What you do is totally different from that. But most people do not know because they do not see what you do most of the time. So that's what library advocacy is. I would suggest that it is a program that educates as many people as you can find on what a library really is, the value of a library to its community, the need for unbiased, independent information, and the benefits of trained information professionals. Now, you will notice that I've repeated several things many times. I am a teacher. I come from a family of teachers, so I know I have to say things at least 3 times before they sink in. You have to say things 3 times as well. So there we go. Now, let me talk for just a second about what I call everyday advocacy versus what I term crisis advocacy. So I would define crisis advocacy as a response to a singular threat. So budget cut, a censorship, ban these books from your library. And unfortunately, we can see many examples of that. I think crisis advocacy is an isolated activity. It is focused on averting a single negative event. It tends to have a very short time frame, often with no notice, and an immediate response is required. Now, it's not that this is bad, but I want to encourage you to get to a place where this kind of crisis advocacy is much less necessary because we have been working on everyday advocacy and we have been educating people. A lot of the reasons for these crisis advocacy things is because nobody really knows what a library is, nobody knows what a librarian does, and very few people understand the benefit of a library to their community. Otherwise, we wouldn't ever have to do this kind of crisis advocacy. But that's what I would call crisis advocacy. Now, I would contrast that with what I'm calling everyday advocacy, which I would suggest is a program of education and involvement. And it's going to address those library assumptions that I say are false. And it's also going to educate all of your stakeholders in the library. I would suggest it has many overlapping and continuous activities. There are multiple opportunities for advocacy, that it's taking place in a planned time frame, and it's a long-term strategy. So it's not an immediate panic. You're able to use time as you have it available. And a lot of the time, everyday advocacy can fit into the cracks. It can fit into 2 spare minutes. It can fit into 3 spare minutes. It's not this drop everything immediately and respond to whatever the current threat is. So that's what I think everyday advocacy is. Now, I'm going to suggest to you these best practices for every advocacy. I'm going to list them and then I'll talk about each one in turn and tell you a little bit more of what I think these might be. So I'm going to suggest that your best practices for everyday advocacy, first of all, develop an advocacy plan. We'll talk about that in a minute. You also need to create a stakeholder list, a list of everybody who has a stake in your library. And I'll just say right now, that list is a whole lot bigger than you think. You need to develop an elevator speech. If you're not familiar with an elevator speech, it's a very short 30 to 40 seconds of telling people everything they need to know. But you need to develop an elevator speech. The next thing is you need to be visible outside the library building. We're all librarians. We love being in the library. It's great, but you need to be outside the library building. You need to be talking about the library everywhere and all the time. You need to equip your staff to become everyday advocates. You need to equip your board as everyday advocates. If you have library volunteers, friends, volunteer workers, you need to equip them as well. And you need to try to include an advocacy activity every single day. Like everything that requires you to develop a habit, the more you do it, the more habitual it becomes, the easier it becomes. And so thinking that an advocacy activity every day is your goal, I think will help you get there. So let me start talking about some of these things, if you will excuse me for 1 second. So what about developing an advocacy plan? Now, don't think of this as strategic planning. Think of this as a to-do list. So the very first thing that I would suggest you do is budget some time. And don't think I have to spend the whole afternoon on this. If you can block out 5 or 10 minutes, block out 5 or 10 minutes and start with that. That is fine. Write down some advocacy goals. What are you going to try to accomplish with your advocacy plan? And that might be, I'm going to train all my board members to be everyday advocates for the library. Okay, great goal. Or I might be, I want to make sure that I have a reasonable stakeholder list. Okay, great. But then once you have some goals, write down some action steps. How are you going to start getting to those goals? Goals are lovely, but you need to move towards them. So write down some action steps. Now, keep it simple and straightforward. I think very often when we think about planning, and especially when people think of planning, they're thinking of strategic planning and it gets terribly high level, but bring it down to reality. Keep it simple, keep it straightforward, and start small. So really, I'm saying, can you schedule 5 minutes a day? And if you can start doing some very effective advocacy, even if it's only 5 minutes a day. And remember, every journey begins with one step. So it's simply starting. Now, the other thing for your advocacy plan is there are lots of really good advocacy resources. For example, on the ALA website, I have some links towards the end of the presentation, but educate yourself on advocacy, which is another part of helping you develop your advocacy plan, is make yourself educated on what advocacy is and how to do it. Now, second thing, create a stakeholder list. I want you to create a list of all the library stakeholders. I make all my students do this in the advocacy class. And you're going to include all the usual folk. Yes, patrons are library stakeholders. Yes, the board are. Yes, the staff are. And yes, the people who are giving you money, whether that be the city council, the county commission, whoever. They're all stakeholders and they're all the usual suspects. But I want you to include all the others: the city council, the school board, parents, students, business leaders, employers, civic organizations, state and federal legislators. All of these people have a stake in the success of your library because your library is crucial to the functioning of your community. And so nothing else can succeed as well as when a community has a highly effective library. I would suggest you ask why someone is not a stakeholder in your library rather than try to define it very narrowly, which means I think everybody in your community is a stakeholder in your library. Now, when I'm talking about contact details, especially email addresses, I'm not expecting you to list the entire population of your city. But I am thinking, do you have emails for all the city council people? Do you have emails for the school board? Do you have emails for the school superintendent? Do you have emails for whoever the president of all the civic organizations is? Do you have the Chamber of Commerce CEO? All those people, you need email addresses. And this is back to the original thing of not only practical, but affordable. Email is free, pretty much. So you can send out an email and it's not costing you a lot of money. It's costing you a little time. It's not costing you a huge amount of money. So this is an effective way to be able to communicate with people that does not cost a lot of money. Make your stakeholder list easy to use and update. So do it in some sort of software, and there's plenty of them that makes it easy for you to send an email to lots of people and to keep updating the list as necessary. But that is your stakeholder list. You need to have in your building a list of people that you are going to educate on what a library is, what a librarian really does and is trained to do, and the value of a library to its community. Now, develop an elevator speech. I said this. The content of your elevator speech is what is important about the library that we share. Just think about that for a second. What is important about the library that we share? And that should be the main content of your elevator speech. Plan for 40 seconds, practice, and then look for opportunities to give your speech. The more you do it, the easier it becomes. Now, I will say to you, because I know a lot of librarians tend to be slightly more reserved, tend to be slightly more introverted. I understand that. I personally am a recluse. I'm a somewhat sociable recluse, but I'm really quite happy in a room by myself. I have to make myself do this. But it is also extremely important that we do this. So I have made myself create an elevator speech, and I give it as many times as I possibly can because it's important that people understand what libraries are. Don't be so rigid in your speech that you can't adapt it as necessary. But the point is, once you've boiled down the essence of the library to 40 seconds and have been able to say it several times, it becomes easier to adapt that speech for different situations. And you will find it becomes easier and easier to do. But the only way it becomes easy to do is if you actually are bold and give the speech. You can start with your dog if you like. I don't mind that, but eventually you have to give your speech to people. And it's amazing how many opportunities you can have. One of the fun things I have my students do, or at least it's fun for me, is not only do they have to develop an elevator speech, they have to give it live to some real person who is not their mother. And then they have to write about what happened. And what's really interesting about that is the number of people who elicited an extremely positive response when they gave their speech. And the students are always so surprised because they're all terrified to do it. And I understand that. But almost the entirety of the student population to whom I've given this assignment have come back with a report of a positive response to this particular thing, to their elevator speech. But remember, what is important about the library that we share? And I would suggest that at the heart of that has to be the understanding that the role of a library is to bring people and information together. So, elevator speech. Now, be visible outside the library building. And this is absolutely vital. So you need to be present at the city council meetings. You need to be present at the Chamber of Commerce. If you've never been to the Chamber of Commerce, you need to go today. If you are not in Rotary, you need to join. If you're not in other civic organizations, you or other members of your staff have to be there. The library has to be a presence. You have as much business in the Chamber of Commerce as any other person, perhaps more. You also have as much business in Rotary as anybody else. You are a vital part of your community, and you need to be outside reminding people every week that you exist for a purpose, and that you are vitally important to the health of your community. So you must be there. You must get out of the library. Take a table at the farmer's market. Take a table at the county fair. Take a table at the street party. Get out there with sign up for library cards. Be out there with whatever you want to. If you have some library freebies, get outside and give them away. Freebies are no good in your library. Get out and give them to people. Even if it's just a little bookmark advertising summer reading, that's lovely. Get out there and give it to people outside the library. If you have a parade, I live in Emporia, Kansas. We have a parade at the drop of a hat. You would not believe how many parades we have. In every parade, the library van is driving in every parade. It's a lovely little white van. It's got a wrap with the library name and logo on it. The library is visible in every parade. And so you need to be visible there too. Those are only suggestions. There are many other ways you could be visible outside the library, but you absolutely must be outside the library. And folks, I know we love standing behind the reference desk, but you cannot stay there. You must get out of your building. Now, go and find the folk who are not in your library. First question, do the people who are not in your library know that you exist? That's another huge assumption that is false. A lot of people who are not using your library don't even know that you exist. Even if they know that you exist, a library is a building with books. I bet they don't know everything that you have to offer. You need to tell them. Next thing, the people who are not in your library, do you actually have what they need? And how would you find that out? Well, you need to be outside and you need to be talking to them and ask. If you don't have what they need, can you get what they need? Because if you don't have what they need, you're actually not serving the whole of your community. And so you need to be looking at that. Here's another question. Are your opening times accessible? I know it's lovely. Everybody wants to work 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. But if everybody else is working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, everybody who's working Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, can't get into your library. So have you looked at how accessible are you to people who are working 9 to 5? Just something to think about. The more people you have using your library, the stronger the argument for funding that library, for maintaining that library, for expanding that library. So you need to be going out to recruit people, excuse me, become users of your library. Now, talk about the library everywhere all the time. Here I am with my repetition. Remember, the reason you need to do this is nobody knows what a library really is. Nobody understands what a librarian does, and nobody recognizes the value of a library to its community. So you must tell them, and you must tell them often and in multiple different ways. So this is essential, but you must be talking about the library all the time. I don't care if people start turning down side streets to get away, because they know when you're coming, they're going to hear about the library. They're going to hear about your latest programs. They're going to hear about the latest success story. They're going to hear about the little girl who just finished her first book reading by herself. Those are things that are important, and you need to talk about them, because that's how people hear. You also must have everyday advocacy messages. Make sure you have advocacy materials in the library. Here's a question for you. Is there anything in your library explaining what it is, i.e. the library? Is there anything in your library explaining what librarians are trained to do? If not, how do you expect people to know what the library is and what librarians are trained to do? Remember, folks, there's an astonishing number of children now who are growing up and being, quote, educated in schools that do not have professional librarians. They have no exposure to professional librarians. And so it's unreasonable for us to expect that if they're growing up in schools with no professional librarians, and if no one's bringing them to the public library, they have no clue what a library is and what you do. So is there something in your library that explains what the library is, the services you offer? Is there anything there talking about what librarians are trained to do? You need to advocate for the library on your website. Again, is there anything on your website that says in a nice little short, concise piece, what is the library there to do? And what are librarians trained to do? Do people understand that librarians are trained to help find information for them at no cost to them? It is a free service. That is astonishing. But you need to tell people. And then include library advocacy messages on your social media. And remembering that social media for your library account has an exceptionally limited readership. Every single social media account you have is a subset of your library users. And remember that your library users are a subset of your community. So please do not post something to one social media and think that that is sufficient advocacy. It's part of it. It's not sufficient, because nobody is looking at every social media thing. And a lot of people don't use social media at all, which is why it needs to be on your website. Social media is not your website. I hope it isn't anyway. So there needs to be something on your website. There needs to be something in your social media. Include stories of library successes. Someone who used the library to get support to pass their GED. Somebody who used the library to help prepare for a citizenship test. Someone, the little girl who read her first book. I don't care what it is, but encourage folk to share library success stories. Somebody who started their own business and used the library resources to help them. Those are the types of things that you need to share, because those are important in helping people understand the value of a library. Now, don't forget to invite people, i.e. stakeholders, to the library. Circulate emails about library events and achievements. I would, if the city council are the people who provide your money, I would invite them to everything. If you have an author event, invite the city council. If you are doing a recognition for, the friend of the year, invite the city council. Actually, invite the mayor to come present it. But invite people all the time. Plan small events, recognitions, anniversaries, whatever it is. Plan small events, lots of them, and invite people all the time. Now, lots of people are not going to come. That doesn't matter. What matters is that the mayor is invited to some event at the library twice a month. And so guess what? In the mayor's mind is, my goodness, the library's having events every other week to which I'm invited. Now, the mayor will come to something that's a photo op. So that's fine. Prepare photo ops, but invite people all the time, because that is also simply reminding them, A, that you exist, B, that you're active, and C, it's every single one of those invitations is an opportunity to share a particular story that shows what the library is doing. Now, get a spot on the local radio. Local radio stations love having people every week or once a month or every other week, and get a spot on the local radio to talk about what's going on at the library, or write a short column for the local newspaper. Again, what's going on at the library? Share those stories. Local media is excellent for this, and they are dying to have people offer to do something on a continual basis. So don't neglect those opportunities. I'm going to skip through this quite briefly, but you need to equip your staff to be everyday advocates. And you need to ensure that your library staff support libraries and professional library standards, by which I would suggest, I mean the Library Bill of Rights, the right to read, the right to view. Do not assume. Here's another assumption. I've talked to library directors who discovered by obvious means that not everybody on their library supported the Library Bill of Rights or agreed with the right to read statement, which was a little bit of a shocker, but it means there is room for education on your library staff. You need to educate your staff and volunteers to explain the 3 library assumptions. What a library really is, what a librarian is trained to do, and the value of a library to its community. And include the staff and volunteers as appropriate in library communications so they know what is going on. Too often we're a little secretive and we don't tell everybody in the building what we're doing and why. But tell them as much as you can, because that helps them feel a part of what you're doing and makes them better advocates. You need to ensure that your board members understand and support professional library standards. Again, do not assume. Has your board actually read the Library Bill of Rights? Is your board on record with a vote of supporting the Library Bill of Rights? If not, worth considering. Are you spending any time in board meetings talking about the right to read, talking about professional library standards? because those are important. Again, educate the board members to explain the 3 library assumptions, and also include the board members in library communications, again, so they know what's going on. You don't ever want anyone in the community walking up to a board member and asking them a question and the board member has no clue.
Andrew, we do have a question about the
Oh, yes.
the comment you made about that I don't recall if it was staff or board members that don't support the Bill of Rights or the right to read. Can they're concerned about the reasoning for that, as I am as well. How, like,
how does that
what is the
happen?
logic of that, or do you know what the reasoning was of saying they did not support the?
Well, here's how it may have come about. A lot of people, particularly in smaller communities, quite often are struggling to find board members. And so they ask people to become board members, and everybody is operating under the assumptions that everybody in the conversation understands what a library is. Everybody understands what a professional librarian is trained to do, and everybody understands the value of a library to its community. If you've heard nothing else from me this time, I think those 3 assumptions are false to a very large degree. So it is not unreasonable that you might have asked somebody to be in the board who thinks they understand what a library is, but they really don't. They do not understand the concept of freedom of information. They do not understand the concept of multiple viewpoints. They do not understand the concept of library neutrality or librarian neutrality.
Right.
And so they may be coming in thinking, I know exactly what the library is, and the library is a lovely place, and it fully, underscores all our community values. And our community values are X, Y, Z.
And our community values are my values, even though there will be other people in my community that may have different values.
Different ones. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
And if you never have a conversation about this, it's entirely reasonable that you have people who are coming in, they're on your board, and that is their understanding. And so their board decisions are going to be governed by their understanding. If you're asking someone to be on your library board, this is really a different topic, but let me just address it. If you're asking someone to be on your library board, you need to start out having a conversation about what a library really is.
Yes.
What a librarian is trained to do, the value of a library to its community, and these documents, such as the Library Bill of Rights, the library, the right to read, the right to view statements of ALA, because it's not reasonable to expect someone to come on a board in ignorance. You need to explain this to them. Now,
if you're going to accept this appointment, here's what we go by. Here's
what this is really about. And I'm sorry if nobody's told you this before, but this is what a library is. And, there are some wonderful statements out there that every good library should have something to offend everybody.
Yes.
If you have a library that you walk into where you agree with every single thing that's listed there, it's not a very good library. So there have always been things in libraries that we have disagreed with. But that is the point. The point is, if you're not free to read opposing viewpoints, then you have lost a lot of your democratic freedoms and the freedom to information. So I think it's educating those board members even before they get on your board to make sure that people understand. I think that's how that particular situation would come about.
Right.
And I think also for the staff as well, somebody's hiring a staff member not for a professional librarian position, and it didn't occur to them that they need to tell people, you're working in an institution that believes this and supports this, and we need you to support this, and you don't have to believe it, but you have to operate under that belief. And again, if we don't have that conversation ahead of time, we can lead ourselves into false places. So I think that's where that would come from.
Makes sense. I get that too. Yeah, and what's like you said, I know you said at the beginning, and we do the struggle with that here in Nebraska too, and I'm sure many other states of people who are here today. Small communities desperate for anyone to be on their library board. Just take anyone and just do it quickly. So we have a name to put down, and you got to do a little more than that.
Yeah. I'm not going to go further down there, Krista,
That's a
because I
whole
get
nother
into a totally
presentation.
different presentation.
Yeah, that's a whole
Let me
nother
just
presentation
talk.
some other time.
Let me just talk about next steps, and then we'll have some times for questions. So the really important thing is that you start now. Start today. So don't think, oh yeah, that's lovely, and next week's a good time to start. Do something now. Now, if you do nothing else today, how about emailing your legislators about the importance of IMLS and libraries? You can write up something very quick and straightforward and zap it to your folks in Washington now. Now, folks, the truth about communication to elected officials is it is a numbers game. So while it would be lovely if you write a 3-page letter detailing every single thing that's going on, that does not count in the same way that you and every other person you can lay hands on writes to your legislator and says, my public library is vitally important to my community because 1, 2, 3, and we need the support of IMLS to fund our access to databases, our access to this, our access to that. And we would encourage you to support the refunding of IMLS. You don't have to be writing huge tomes. You don't have to be polishing for weeks. You need to, but what counts is that you wrote and that folks are counting the number of emails, the number of letters that come in. And that determines a lot of how your elected officials are voting, is the number of people who are expressing support one way or the other. So I think do one thing today, even if it's only jot down some notes, do something, do another thing tomorrow. Start thinking about stakeholders, start in your speech, write down some ideas. Start looking for opportunities to share your library's story and keep doing one small thing every day. Notice that a lot of these things, you don't have to be outside your building. You don't have to take a lot of time, but you are starting to do these little advocacy activities. And the more you do that, you are forming the everyday advocacy habit. And folks, my suggestion is that the more often we are talking about the library, the more often we are debunking the library assumptions, then the more people are understanding what a library is, why professional librarians are important, and the value of the library to their community, so that it is much easier also to encourage them to write a 2-line email to their legislators, to the city council, to anybody else, because they are there saying, no, I don't want people cutting all the funding to the library. You know, where are the kids going to get this? Where's this going to happen? So work on this, and it's a little often. A little often is going to get us to where we want to be. And so there are some excellent resources. All of these are ALA resources, the Advocacy and Issues homepage, the Frontline Advocacy Toolkit, and the Advocacy Getting Started. These are all excellent resources, but the most important thing is to start, and is to do something, and is to do something today. So I will stop at that point and say thank you very much. I think I might risk turning on my camera, although it may look like the... Just a minute. Let's try that.
There you are. Yes. Yep.
Okay, I can't see myself. How do I turn myself off? Let me go here.
Yep, you look good. Yep.
Okay. People can see me, it says.
Yes.
How do I stop sharing my screen here?
Well, keep your slides up just in case we want anyone
Oh, okay.
to refer back to
Yeah.
them. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I just closed it. Sorry, that was a nuisance.
And I will mention while you're doing that, because someone did ask, of course. Yes, the slides will be available afterwards with the show archives that we put up. So you'll have access to those links that were built into that last, second to last slide there that Andrew had on there. So yes, you will have access to all those slides. Yes.
So happy to entertain questions.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So thank you so much, Andrew. This was wonderful information, of course. I took lots of notes too. I did so anybody does have any questions or comments or anything you want to share, type into the questions section if you go to webinar interface, as some people have been doing. And we will grab them for today. So you got some thank yous coming through, very informative. Somebody said they were very extremely concerned about when you mentioned what I asked about the board members. Let's see here. Oh, here's a comment. Someone says, as a new librarian, they put new in quotes, this information is very helpful. Thank you so much for the tips to engage others in what our library is and the importance it has for our community. Absolutely. And I was very much the difference, because people talk about advocacy, and the difference between the everyday and the crisis advocacy that you mentioned at the beginning, I think was very important. When things come up like IMLS and what's happening right now, yeah, that's people like you get all these emails from ALA or every library or somebody saying do this, and so everyone panic. Oh, how do I do that? What do I do? And that's okay. Yes, do something when something comes up, but making this an everyday habit, I think, would then make that crisis advocacy easier. Correct? Like if you have the habit of how to do advocacy in general, once these crises come up, you're like, I know what to do.
The whole thing about the crisis or crises is, I think a lot of the crises are stemming from the fact that people don't understand libraries.
Right.
They don't understand what they are. They don't understand the value, and they've no clue what librarians do. So it's this sort of idea, everything's available online.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go with this idea that everything's available online, yes, the idea that you would fund a building full of, silly old-fashioned print just seems ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
But, silly old-fashioned print actually, in many ways, has many advantages over digital. Digital is so impermanent.
Mm-hmm.
And when you talk to archivists are not all that impressed with digital. Digital can be a fabulous access mechanism. It can be excellent, but as a long-term storage medium, it is not the best. And stuff vanishes. Anyone who knows anything, I mean, if you've ever been online and discovered broken links,
oh yeah,
they're everywhere. Because stuff changes all the time and addresses change and people move things and suddenly something isn't there. Well, but that's no use. So this fallacy that everything's online is just that. It's a complete fallacy. But also what is online and how the search engines choose to give it to you ought to be something that people understand and are exceptionally concerned about. When the internet first came out, the major search engines presented information, and in a little box at the top of the page would be 3 sponsored results that were providing some sort of monetary output to the search engine. I think now the first 3 pages of any search are ranked by the monetary outcome to the search engine, and it's not listed that those are providing monetary gain to the search engine. So this is why it's important people understand the difference between a search engine providing results based on profit and a librarian providing results based on providing the most accurate information in response to the user question. Those are two entirely different things.
Yeah.
Now, search engines are lovely. I use them every day, but I understand what they are, what they're doing. The majority of people don't, and that's why they think a search engine is as good as or better than a library. And it's another one of these things we have to educate people on.
Critical thinking, yes, absolutely.
Yep.
We do have a request. Can we hear your elevator speech? You said you have one that you do prepared.
Not totally at the moment. That's just off my my brain isn't quite there at the moment. I have to be, because I'm thinking of other things. I would say that my elevator speech is built around this idea of what a library is. And my definition of a library is an institution that brings people and information together.
Yep.
People, information together. And I'm providing that very strong, or I hope it's a very strong visual image. I can't see myself. I can only see my slides.
No, it looks good.
People
Perfect. Yep.
and information together. And the point about that is that a library is there for everybody in the community. You also need to look at those points I was making about the library is the only institution in your city that is responsible from birth to kindergarten, from 12th grade for the rest of your life. And in between as well. There are some other people who are responsible for K through 12, but not alone. The library is there as a support. But you're the only people that are there for early learning and for learning afterwards. And folks, if you haven't read the research on early learning, it's actually quite frightening. What is coming out of the research in early learning is that young children, very young children, must hear a certain amount of live language before the age of 2. That is how they are developing, their brains developing, it's how they're developing their understanding of language, but it must be live. So recorded language is not the same. So you can't just dump your kid in front of the TV and think that's sufficient. They must hear live language. There is a difference in the cognitive development of young children who hear live language and young children who don't. And certainly, I was reading something, it's a while ago now, but it was people in kindergarten, actually in the UK, who were concerned because they had children in their class who did not respond to hearing their name called because they had not heard their name called, if you can imagine. And so just thinking of the barren environment in which those children are growing up. And essentially, if you're not hearing enough live language by the age of 2, you are extremely disadvantaged for the entirety of your learning career thereafter. That is vital. So it's vital that libraries, we think silly things, it's just, a toddler's group, or it's story time, or it's something else. It's not silly. It's actually vitally important to the development of learning for children. Absolutely. Before age 2. So doing stuff with babies, it may seem like silliness and people might dismiss it. It isn't silly. It's vitally important. And as more and more people are spending time on these, and not talking to their children and not involving their children, then it's even more important that the library is there providing that kind of support.
Yeah. Someone says, where do I sign up to read to little kids?
Oh, exactly.
Volunteer at your library, yeah.
Now, I think that's wonderful. There are some really good library programs of, I sort of jokingly call them reading grannies. But if you're a library and you have older people living close to the library who have a lot of time in their hands, can they come and read? Can they come and read stories in your library? And, you know, they're not caring that, oh, you know, well, there were only 3 kids there, or, you know, I didn't have 25 people at my program. The numbers don't matter. That there was somebody there and that you had somebody who was willing to read is extremely important.
Yep.
Those are also things where you might look at the local volunteer organizations and see if they can support those sorts of things too. Because again, a lot of the civic organizations have a lot of retired people with time. Are they willing to come and read stories for you? I know that some people want to do programs that are more like recorded books. You know, we'll do this once. And quite apart from the copyright issues that we will not discuss, that is lacking because, again, it's not live. It's not live conversation. It's not live language. And what I think I'm seeing from the research is it is live language that is exceptionally important. So the more people you can have talking in your library, I know we all want quiet spaces, but the more people you actually have talking in your library, the more important it is. And little things, little programs, toddler groups, baby groups, everything with, you know, little songs, rhymes, rhyming games, those are vitally important. And so not to be dismissed.
A good suggestion. I'm not sure if it's something they've done, but the mayor's reading group, like get the mayor to come in, city employees and volunteering to read to kids in schools or in the library.
Yep.
You know, invite some of your stakeholders in the community to be the ones that come in and do a special reading to the kids.
Absolutely.
Local celebrities, whoever they might be.
You know, the other thing is don't do this one day a year.
Make it a series.
Find a way to make this happen every week.
We do have a question here about advocacy that I wanted to do before, and I know we're a little after 11 o'clock, everyone. Yes, but I think we'll do this last question here and then wrap things up. If you do need to leave because you only allotted an hour to the show, that's fine. Everything's recorded and you come watch later. Someone wants to know, and it is about crisis advocacy, but what would you recommend for post-crisis advocacy? I'm in Georgia and we just narrowly squeaked by without getting a major piece of anti-library legislation passed. Now that it didn't pass, people aren't continuing the advocacy as much. But there's nothing stopping our legislators from getting it passed or trying to get it passed in the next session. So how do you maintain people's attention now that the initial crisis has passed and they potentially think, oh, we're safe now?
Well, this is where your everyday advocacy comes in, because great, congratulations on getting that done. But now you have, 300 days to start teaching people what a library really is, why it's important, and what librarians do and are trained to do, so that the next time this comes around, there are more people who understand what the library is. There are more people who will be able to write to their senators, their Congress people, and say, no, we want to support libraries. So I think the big adrenaline rush is over, but now is the time to start doing the small things. I would start out making sure, is everybody on your board online with the right to read statement, with the right to view statement, with the Library Bill of Rights? Here's the other thing. In Emporia, we went over things periodically, so that we revisited things and we invited discussion at board meetings, so that it wasn't, we did it once when you were coming on the board, and if you've been on the board for 4 years, we haven't talked about it since. But we actually did bring that up. And it's also much easier to have those kinds of discussions when there's not something looming over you.
Yeah.
So I think start on those everyday advocacy activities. The more people that we have with a positive experience of the library, the better off we're going to be. So also, I would be out there looking for the folks who aren't in your library. Why are they not in your library? And what can I do to get them into the library? And again, I think a lot of people are not in your library because they simply don't know. They don't know where it is. They don't know that it exists. They don't understand what it can do for them. And we are fabulous. Librarians are absolutely fabulous. If someone walks through the door and asks for something, we are great. We are much less good at telling people what it is they can walk through the door and ask for, because we assume they know. And we are way past the time when people understood libraries. We're way past that time. A lot of people have no exposure to a library or a professional librarian for the first 18, 23 years of their lives. So we need to go out and tell them who we are, what we do, and that we're a service for them and we're free. And no matter what it is they need, information-wise, we will get it for them. And it doesn't cost them money.
Awesome.
And that's huge. That is huge.
Yes.
But it's a well-kept secret. I know the librarians are all rolling their eyes and saying, I can't believe that. But trust me, it's a well-kept secret.
I'm sure we've all experienced it with our friends or family when they make their silly comments about, oh, must be nice, like you said, to read all day, or, hey, let's talk, what do you think of the Dewey Decimal System? The silly things. Like, no, that's not. It's so much more. And I saw a statistic recently, and I know I'm being a bad librarian and bad researcher. I don't know where it's credited, but our local news station does a question of the day, and they asked, what is something that or what percentage of schools don't have this, and it was librarians. That 30-something% of schools do not have a librarian, the K-12 schools. So you're sending your kids to school every day, but they're not encountering a library or a librarian doing the typical job. That would be the public library needs to show them, here is what a library is and what librarians can do for you as a child. Yeah.
And I think what's even more insidious is school libraries that are run by people who have the title but have no professional preparation. Now, I know everybody can't have professional preparation, and there are a lot of rural and small libraries that have excellent people who are not yet had professional training, because it's expensive for what very often in smaller and rural libraries is not well compensated work at all. So it becomes difficult. But I think when schools are deliberately removing professional staff to replace them with non-professional staff who do not understand what they don't know. They're lovely people and they're doing the best they can, but they don't understand what they don't know. And so what is being provided for the children is not the same that a professional librarian would be providing for children or ensuring that the children have access to. So it's an issue. And unfortunately, more and more states seem quite willing to dispense with professional librarians in schools. Which is a very unfortunate state of affairs, but partly because we have assumed everybody knows what a professional librarian is trained to do and why that's important. And the majority of people don't know. Remember, professional librarians read all day in stamp books. That is the image of librarians. So we need to spend some time educating people as to what librarians are truly trained to do and why that matters.
The school administrators and superintendents and school boards too need to be taught. Yeah.
Absolutely. And all those people should be on your stakeholder list.
Yeah. All right. That's the last actual question we had that popped up here. So I think, as I said, we're a little over. I think we can wrap things up for today.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Andrew. This was great. So much good information here, I think, for people that are going to use. I hope in the future, definitely something that we hear the word advocacy all the time. And it's really good to have some concrete tips and ways to do it, because it can be, I think, a very intimidating, possibly overwhelming word for a small rural librarian who is, they work 15 hours for the library and they're also the postmaster and they have their own kids and they need something to, here's how you can do it. It's okay. You can do it.
Sure. The important thing is just to start.
Mm-hmm.
Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for until you're perfect. Simply start, and start small. Tell people what you're doing today. Tell people what happened at the library today and why that matters. That's also important, and why that matters to their community. Because that's what starts people understanding. And the more people understand about the library and how it affects their community. This is the other thing about online search engines versus your library. Your library is there for your community. You have a personal connection. There is no personal connection between a search engine and your community. The personal is important. Your community is important. Make sure that people recognize that you are woven into the fabric of your community. And remember, your library is a place bringing people and information together.
Yep, absolutely. Someone does say they do have a question, and I'm waiting for them to get it
Sure.
in here. While I'm waiting to do that, what I'm going to do, let's see. I'm going to pull presenter control over to my screen.
Okay.
So there we go. Just so I can do my wrap up as well. I'll keep an eye on this for, go ahead and type in whatever question you have. I do have a couple of minutes here. I do my wrap up, and any other last minute questions we will ask. We will definitely get taken care of. So if you, as I said, today's show is being recorded and will be available on our show archives. Should be by the end of the day tomorrow. If you use whatever is your search engine of choice, oh, here we go. Okay, yeah. So, all right, so here's the question that just came in. It says, do you think that a well-made commercial, like commercial in quotes, that can be put online can break the ice and get the ball rolling so people can become aware of the roles of librarians? They put together some sort of pre-made thing.
Sure. Yes. But long ago, in when I was at college, I took a class in marketing. And we sat in class for 16 weeks with an exceptionally expensive textbook. And at the end of 16 weeks, I remember the professor said, just remember, the best form of marketing is word of mouth. And that is still that is still true. I understand. So yes, a commercial on your website is lovely, but it is not a substitute. That's one more thing. When I say you need to talk often and to everybody, and you must have multiple ways of doing things. As soon as you put something on your website, that is limited to the people who are visiting your website and who click the link. So you've already knocked out some fair portion of your population. So yes, the people who are on your website and who click the link and watch your video, that is excellent. You need other methods to reach the people who are not on your website, who are on your website but don't click the link. And also, never underestimate the power of the personal connection. It is absolutely vital. You standing next to someone, telling them what's going on in the library or sharing a story is much more powerful than anything on media. The immediacy of the personal has a power that TV cannot replicate or video cannot replicate. So by all means, yes, that's an excellent idea. It is not sufficient by itself.
So do that and everything.
Yeah, do that and everything else. But it's you as the librarian, you talking about the library is important. Your board members talking about the library, your employees talking about the library. Those are things that are very important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, thank you. I said thank you. Thanks for the tips. Yes, absolutely. All right. So as I was saying, yes, our show is recorded, and if you use whatever is your search engine of choice and type in NCompass Live, the name of our show, you will get our main page for the show. And a link, or you also come up with our archive page. So here's our upcoming shows. Underneath them is a link to our archived shows. So this is where all of our show recordings are. Today's show will be here at the top of the list, most recent one's top. Everyone who attended today's show and registered for today's show will get an email from me letting you know when it's ready. Should be by the end of the day tomorrow, as long as GoToWebinar and YouTube cooperate with me. And as I said, there will be a link to the show itself, the recording of the show on YouTube, and a link to the slides that Andrew had that he's going to send to me. You can do a search while I'm here on our show archives. I'll show you, you can do a search for any topic you might be interested in to see if we've done a show about that. You can search the full show archives or just the most recent 12 months if you just want something very current. And that is because this is our full show archives, and I'm not going to scroll all the way down because you can see this is just one gigantic page, which is why we have the search feature up there. But it is our full show archives going back to when NCompass Live first premiered, which was in January 2009. So that makes this our 17th year of the show, which just blows my mind, but there's always new things to talk about with libraries, so we keep going. And this is something you did mention too, Andrew, archivists and whatnot, and some things that we librarians do, we keep things for historical purposes. And as long as we have a place to host all of our show archives, which is right now the Library Commission's YouTube channel, we'll always have the recordings up here for you to watch. So just do pay attention to, and when you are watching an old show, to the original broadcast date. You'll see all of these have on when they were originally first done live. So you know how old the show is. Some things will be fine to watch, stand the test of time, still be good, useful information, but and also, as you mentioned, Andrew, some things will become old and outdated. Links might be broken. Resources we talked about might have changed drastically since we talked about them 10 years ago, or might not exist anymore. People may work at a different institution than when they presented for us. As I said, we always keep these up here just for historical reasons and doing our librarian duty. So look for the recording to come in the next day or so. We also are on social media. We have a Facebook page for NCompass Live. If you like to use Facebook, give us a like over there. We do reminders. Here's a reminder to log in today's show, our Meet the Speaker posts. And when the recording is up, here's the one from last week, I will post on here as well. We also use the little abbreviated hashtag, there we go, NComp Live on any social media. The Library Commission has an Instagram page, and they're still on Twitter and Facebook. So look for NComp Live everywhere on your socials for anything about the show. So that'll wrap it up for today's show. Thank you so much for being here, Andrew. This is great. I'm so glad we were able to get you on. And I hope your nose is doing better. You look good.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was absolutely my pleasure.
It's great to have you. So here's our upcoming shows next couple of months. And next week it is, we were talking about public library accreditation. This is a very Nebraska focused topic. We do have an accreditation process here in Nebraska for our public libraries if they want to become accredited. So if you are a Nebraska public library, this would be a session to a little quick 1-hour overview of the process. I do also full 3-hour workshops that are coming up next month in June. They are scheduled, so you can check our calendar for that. That's a full in-depth. This is just the overview. So if you're interested in becoming accredited or renewing your accreditation, this would be a session just to watch. Or if you're from another state, you're just interested in how we do things here, join us and learn all about Nebraska's public library accreditation process. Let's see. Oh, and someone says, are we on Blue Sky yet? Not yet. We're talking about it. So maybe we'll see if we get things set up on Blue Sky. As I know that's one newish. It's been around for about a year. Social media alternative that many libraries are switching to. So we'll see. All right. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for being here and sticking around for that with us. And hopefully we'll see you all on a future episode of NCompass Live. Bye-bye.